What if civilization began before we were taught? Before Egypt? Before Sumer? Before writing? People were already shaping stone, carving symbols, and gathering in places that still confuse archaeologists today. Not because they had hidden machines, not because aliens built their monuments, but because ancient humans may have been far more organized, skilled, and imaginative than most of us ever realized. And one question keeps returning. If people more than 10,000 years ago could carve stone, build symbolic places, process food, and organize large groups, then where does civilization really begin? For a long time, the story sounded simple. First, humans wandered. Then they farmed. Then they built villages. Then cities appeared. And only after that came temples, kings, writing, and the great civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia. It is a clean timeline. It is easy to remember. But archaeology rarely stays clean. The deeper we dig, the more complicated the story becomes. Because beneath the ruins of famous kingdoms, there is an older world. A world without pharaohs, a world without written laws, a world without stone pyramids rising into the sky. And yet, in that older world, people were already making choices that look surprisingly modern. They selected stone. They shaped it with skill. They carved animals into pillars. They gathered in places that required planning, effort, and shared belief. These discoveries do not prove a lost empire. That is important. Old tools alone do not mean there was a secret kingdom, a forgotten city, or an advanced civilization hiding in the Stone Age. But they do show something almost as powerful. The roots of civilization may reach much deeper than the famous names we learned first. And to understand why, we have to begin with a place that changed how many people imagine the ancient world. Göbekli Tepe. In the hills of southeastern Turkey, archaeologists uncovered monumental stone enclosures and T-shaped limestone pillars. Some of these pillars were carved with images of wild animals: snakes, foxes, boars, birds, creatures from a world that existed before cities, before writing, and before the classic age of kings. The site dates to the pre-pottery Neolithic period, roughly between 9,600 and 8,200 BCE. That means parts of it are around 11,500 years old. Older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, older than the first writing systems. And this is where the mystery begins. The people connected with Göbekli Tepe were not living in the kind of civilization most people imagine. They were not building a kingdom with palaces and armies. They were not leaving behind royal tombs or written records. But they were organizing enough labor to move and shape heavy stone. They were carving symbols that meant something to them. They were creating a place that was clearly more than a simple camp. So the question is not, did they have a lost empire? The better question is more interesting. How complex were human societies before civilization had a name? Think about what it takes to build something monumental. You need people to gather in one place. You need planning. You need memory. You need shared purpose. You need tools that can cut, strike, scrape, shape, and carve. And you need an idea powerful enough to make people spend time and energy on something that is not just food or shelter. That is why ancient tools matter. A tool is not only a stone in the hand, it is a decision made visible. A sharp edge means someone understood force. A carved surface means someone understood control. A repeated pattern means someone learned, remembered, and passed knowledge to others. When you look at a stone tool from the distant past, you're not just looking at rock. You're looking at a moment when the human mind changed the natural world on purpose. But there is a mistake many videos make here. They say, these tools should not exist. In truth, stone tools are much older than 10,000 years. Some of the oldest known stone tools are millions of years old. So the mystery is not that ancient people used tools. The mystery is what some later tools and ancient sites reveal about organization, symbolism, food, memory, and social life before the first famous civilizations. That is a stronger story, and it is more real. At Göbekli Tepe, the pillars are not just big stones. They show animals carved with intention. They show design. They show a symbolic world. And because the site is so old, it creates a serious challenge for the simple timeline. For many years, people assumed that farming came first, then permanent villages, then religion and monuments. But sites like Göbekli Tepe suggest the relationship may have been more complicated. Maybe shared rituals helped pull people together. Maybe gathering places encouraged cooperation. Maybe belief, memory, and identity were not late products of civilization. Maybe they helped create it. But this is where we must be careful. Archaeology is not built on one exciting headline. It is built on layers of evidence. Researchers look at where an object was found. They study the soil around it. They compare it with other objects. They use dating methods when organic material is available. They ask whether an artifact was shaped by human hands or whether nature could explain it. And they challenge each other, again and again. That skepticism is not the enemy of mystery. It is what makes the mystery worth trusting. Because if a discovery survives careful testing, then its story becomes far more powerful. And Göbekli Tepe is not the only clue that early humans were more capable than the old, simple story suggests. In northeastern Jordan, at a site called Shubaika 1, researchers found charred remains of bread-like food made by hunter-gatherers about 14,400 years ago. That is thousands of years before farming became fully established in that region. Think about that for a moment. Bread sounds ordinary today, but making bread-like food requires knowledge. You have to gather plants, process them, grind them, mix them, cook them, and repeat the process well enough for it to matter. This was not a city. It was not an empire. But it shows planning. It shows experimentation. It shows people transforming the landscape and its resources with skill. Then there is Çatalhöyük in Turkey. It is later than Göbekli Tepe, but it helps us understand the long road toward settled life. At Çatalhöyük, archaeologists found layers of Neolithic occupation, houses, symbolic art, wall paintings, reliefs, and evidence of changing social life. Again, this was not Egypt. It was not Sumer. But it shows something important. Civilization did not appear suddenly, fully formed, with kings and writing and monuments. It emerged step by step, through settlement, food processing, ritual, labor, communication, memory, and shared meaning. These are not small things. They are the building blocks of civilization. And they do not appear all at once. They grow slowly, over thousands of years, through experiments that most people never hear about. This is the part of history that is easy to miss. When we look at Egypt, we see the result: pyramids, temples, writing, kings, a powerful state. When we look at Sumer, we see cities, records, trade, laws, and administration. But before those famous civilizations, there were countless earlier steps. Someone had to learn how to organize a group. Someone had to remember where materials came from. Someone had to teach a younger person how to strike stone at the right angle. Someone had to decide that an animal carved into stone meant something important. Someone had to return to the same place again and again until that place became part of a shared world. Civilization did not begin with a single king. It did not begin with one city suddenly appearing out of nowhere. It began as a long chain of human choices, some practical, some symbolic, some social, some spiritual. And many of them happened before anyone wrote them down. That is why this story is so fascinating. The ancient past is not silent because nothing happened. It is silent because the people who lived it left their evidence in stone, bone, ash, soil, and carved symbols instead of written words. And every time archaeologists uncover another piece, the silence becomes a little less empty. So, did we find a lost civilization? Not in the dramatic way the phrase usually suggests. There is no confirmed hidden empire here, no proven vanished super city, no evidence that ancient humans had technology beyond what archaeology can explain, but we may have found something more important. A lost chapter. A buried phase of human creativity. A time when people were already building the mental and social foundations that later civilizations would stand on. That is the real rewrite. Not that everything we know is wrong, but that the beginning was deeper, slower, and more human than the simple story ever allowed. The tools do not whisper about aliens. They whisper about patience, skill, memory, belief, and the strange power of humans to imagine something before it exists. Before Egypt, someone shaped stone. Before Sumer, someone carved meaning into the world. Before writing, someone taught another person what they knew. And before civilization had a name, its first shadows may already have been moving across the earth. So what do you think? Was this the beginning of civilization? Or only one clue from something even older? Share your theory in the comments and subscribe for more science-based ancient mysteries.